Alert, Swainley Menyi has joined the meeting. Alert, Swainley Menyi is connecting to audio and can't hear you yet. Alert, Swainley Menyi is connecting to audio and can't.
Okay. Mr. Manyi, can you hear us? Hi. Good evening to you. Jimmy. Mzwanele, can you hear us, sir? We are still experiencing some technical glitches here. Good evening to you, Mzwanele. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, man. We had a bit of... we experienced some technical glitches here since, you know, it's this time of the load shedding, man. Our apologies for that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Mzwanele Manyi, for taking your time to talk to us. It is indeed a great pleasure to have you on our show tonight. Welcome to it.
Thank you very much. Apologies for all the glitches on my side as well about load shedding.
Yeah.
So I'm operating with a makeshift arrangement now.
Yeah. Anyway, but okay, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much once more. Now let's get straight into it before we roll along to our listeners and our viewers. Can you just kindly tell us who is Mzwanele Manyi? And
Alert, keep hand raised for 3 seconds.
How would you prefer to describe yourself to the audience and the listeners out there? Who is exactly Mzwanele Manyi?
Opportunity, because indeed I have many hats, but I think I would rather be known as Mzwanele Manyi, a guy that was born and bred in Meadowlands, in Soweto, Ndofaya, Zone 4. That's where I actually come from, but professionally I studied geology, economic geology, but I've been doing all kinds of things, marketing, all kinds of things that I've been doing across industries. I started as I said, as a geologist in the mining space, exploration space.
Yeah.
Moved over to banking, spent about 6 years or so there. I moved over to ICT. I worked for IBM. Over to FMCG. I worked for fast food, FMCG Tiger Brands, and then I moved into government. I became DG of Labor, and then I became cabinet spokesperson and all of that. And after that, and I had the interesting thing of buying up through vendor financing the media entity of the Guptas, which got me into all kinds of stigmatization, which I'm sure we'll cover tonight wherever we can. But anyway, this is where I am now, and I sit here and I'm ready.
Yeah. Quite a very impressive CV, quite a very impressive and colorful CV, I must really say, Mr. Manyi, you have come a long way. Now, let's get into the political business of the day. Can you kindly take us through, when did you join the struggle and why, before we get into the business side of it?
Yeah, I don't consider myself a person that has been in some struggle or whatever.
Yeah.
Those are hardcore politicians. For me, I was just working and all of that. But I think in terms of making a contribution to the transformation of South Africa, my contribution was within mainly the BMF space.
Yeah.
We saw ourselves, the BMF, as corporate guerrillas, as it were. This was our space, not politics, but much more about trying to transform the landscape within the workplace. So I've never been to exile. I've been here in Soweto all this time. I've been smelling tear gas. I've been running. I've been dodging police here in Soweto. I think if anyone was to say Manyi and struggle credentials, that would be a serious misrepresentation. Don't put me in that category. I was just with the people of Soweto and Azikwelwa and Soweto. So when Malema was talking about the shutdown, I could relate to it because we had Azikwelwa and at Soweto. So I related very much to shutdown because I think it's things like Azikwelwa that has brought us here, because the establishment, the only thing they respond to is economic issues. So if you don't turn down the tap, if you don't dry the tap, then they continue doing as they please. So that's me.
All right. Still talking to the man himself, Mr. Mzwanele Manyi. He's our guest tonight on the Street Sunday show. So we are unpacking some of the very topical issues, of course. Now, let's get to the thick and thin of things. Let's start with the most topical issue. Many people have seen you, and they're still seeing you from time to time, attending a very serious, what I should call it, the case of the century, the arms deal. This is a topical issue. Now, it has been almost 15 or more than 15 years now since this case has been going on and on and on and on. And many people are saying, but how did it happen? And how did it happen whereby President Zuma, by then, he was an MEC of, I think it was an MEC in KwaZulu-Natal of, you'll remind me. But now, just take us through, what is exactly going on here in this case? Why this case has taken so long? It's been more than 15 years now this case has been dragging on. It has now been dubbed the trial of the century. Can you just take us through confidence? Actually, what is really going on here with the prosecution of the former President Zuma? And why President Zuma, it seems, he's being hated so much? That's
a very interesting question. We can talk the whole day on this issue. But in summary, I really just think that this is just politics more than anything else. You will hear people saying Zuma has been involved in what they call Stalingrad, delaying the case and what have you. But what is the truth? The truth is that when this thing started, Bulelani Ngcuka is on record many times, even as recent as last week in the interview he had with Annie Kalasin at the ENCA, that there was not enough
prima
to
facie
convict
evidence.
President Zuma on. And the reason there's not enough is because that's the language they use, because they were just giving him as a lead. But when they went to dig as to what is the lead, and they didn't find anything substantive to could nail him. Here's actually what really happened. What really happened here, firstly, as you would know, President Zuma is sitting in KZN minding his own business as an MEC for economic affairs, whatever, in KZN. The deal happens here in Gauteng with the national government. And everybody, if you wanted to talk about corruption or anything, you must then look at the people that were running things in at a national level. President Zuma was not even part of this. Of this thing. He comes in with what they call an encrypted fax, and this encrypted fax, it's when you actually look at it, it's actually some scribbled notes. This encrypted fax is almost like a technical term that will give an impression that something that was coded. No, it's some secretary that was scribbling notes and so on, and they call this thing an encrypted fax. But this encrypted fax, you never know that up to today, we actually don't know what is this thing in this encrypted fax that actually implicates President Zuma. One of the things that Bulelani Ngcuka has been saying is that people all over, they talk about President Zuma, the correspondence they find is somebody saying something about President Zuma, but there's nothing that says President Zuma now does this. There's no email from President Zuma. There's no letter from President Zuma. There's no request from President Zuma. There's nothing. It's just people that name drop him left, right, and center, and somehow because of all of that, he's mired in this. And Bulelani Ngcuka was not the first person to say there's nothing here. Another National Director of Public Prosecution, again, Advocate Mje, also said there's nothing here, and he dropped the thing. And they are not the only ones. We also went to court, Judge Nicholson, I think, also, he said there's nothing here, this is just politics and all of that. So there's been enough authorities, there's been enough members of the judiciary, people that understand law that have said there's nothing here. This
scan, empty. Who's using Chrome? Has finished loading.
Okay.
Continue, Mr. Manyi. Go ahead.
Do I proceed?
Yes, sure.
So this thing only gets resuscitated now by the DA. They said no, the case must be reviewed. Then they said Mche's decision was a rationale. Now that's what we're busy with now, with all the politics of this thing and all of that. So that's really where we are. But if truth be told, this is just a nonsensical case. And if you look actually what is the amount involved and what is the detail, South Africa has been lied to, has been told that Zuma is facing 783 charges. No, those are particular transactions, 783 transactions. Some of them, it's a dry clean transaction. Some of them are car wash transactions. A situation here is that when President Zuma came back from exile, he was assisted by a whole range of people. Shabir was one of them. So Shabir would assist him and get him his dry clean. But Shabir would keep a list of all these things that he was doing for President Zuma. And when he helps him with a car wash, he makes a list of this. If he gives him pocket money, 500 rand, he keeps a list of this. So all of these things, they add up to 783 transactions and all of that. But when you look at the value of that, including some of the issues that are there in those 783 are issues like tax returns that you didn't fill in the tax this year, you didn't fill in the tax last year or something like that, which are things that even as we speak today, everybody has got tax issues and all of that. But for President Zuma, all of that has now been turned into some kind of a criminal this, a criminal that. Total value of everything put together is only about 4 million that we're dealing with here. And I'm almost sure the state must have spent a good R1 billion or more chasing President Zuma. And you can see that this thing here is really not about the so-called arms deal. They are trying to kill an idea that President Zuma represents. This is what this is about. I mean, if you look, for instance, on the Zondo Commission as an example, at the Zondo Commission, you then have the judges of the Constitutional Court saying that to take Zuma to jail is more important than for him to continue at the State Capture Commission and give answers that he was accused of all these kinds of things. They say no, because he's disrespected the court, he must go for 15 months in jail. Now, the whole Zondo Commission was set up with an understanding that President Zuma had abdicated his responsibility to the Guptas. So the commission was about unearthing that and getting to the bottom of that. But when they realized that, man, this is not getting anywhere, because as we speak here and now, there is not one minister that admitted to have been appointed by the Guptas. Not even Fikile Mbalula, who were told he cried at one of the ANC meetings of the ANC to say he was appointed by the Guptas and what have you. But when he was in front of Zondo, and when he was asked about that, he denied everything, said, no, me now I was appointed by President Zuma and all of that. The other people were just congratulating me and so on and so on. So as we speak here and now, there hasn't been even a shred of evidence to back up all the nonsensical things that were into this report to see President Zuma had given power to the Guptas. So that's why it was easy for the Concord to say, well, now that we can't even get him on that Zondo thing, let's throw him in jail. All they want to say the system is against President Zuma's ideology, because he's also the man that drove the issue of BRICS, as it were, to get us away from the IMFs, from the World Banks of this world, and from the influence of America and all of that. He was trying to get us onto the more progressive arrangement of people that never colonized us. Russia never colonized us. China never colonized us. India never colonized us. These are the people that he was trying to get South Africa to be in partnerships with, and all of that. So now that whole idea does not fly with the Western narrative. So therefore, President Zuma has to be destroyed by hook or by crook. If you can't get him on the arms deal, get him on the Zondo. If I can't get him on the Zondo, find something. So really, this is what we're dealing with in this country. But I can tell you now, I sit here, I'm very clear in my mind that President Zuma has done nothing that is unlawful, has not stolen anybody's money, has not gotten any kickbacks, has not abdicated his executive authority to the Guptas. If he had, surely by now, there should be one person that says, I, as the minister of such and such, I was appointed by the Guptas. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever for all the allegations that they're making against him. So we're sitting here with an innocent man that is being persecuted. That's what's happening.
Okay, now still talking about the innocent man, but now why is it only the innocent man, it's only President Zuma that should play by the rules? Talking about the very arms deal case, we have never seen the Minister of Defense coming to testify, or by then President, which by then it was President Mandela, and the Deputy President was
Alert, keep hand raised.
the Deputy President was Thabo Mbeki, and of course I think the Minister of Defense by then it was the late Mr. Joe Modise, and of course the Minister of Finance by then I think it was Trevor Manuel. I mean, all these people, I mean, they had a hand in this and they played different roles, but we haven't seen them being called before the courts of law to testify in terms of what they know and what has transpired during their term of office. It's only President Zuma that must play by the rules. Why are we not seeing other ministers being called to testify in terms of their role, particularly the Minister of Defense by then? Because as you alluded earlier on, that President Zuma by then he was an MMC of development in KZN. I mean, he was a junior, he was not in the highest office, but those who were in the highest office by then, it was President Mandela, and of course this deputy was Deputy President Mbeki, Minister of Finance Trevor Manuel, you had Joe Modise and others, but we haven't had anything. We haven't heard their side of the story. It's only just one man that we see he's going to play by the rules, and it's only President Zuma. So these are million-dollar questions that people are asking on the ground to say, why is it only President Zuma? What about others? And again, who do you exactly believe benefited from this billionaire arms deal? as you said, President Zuma, he got nothing. He never stole a cent from it. But there are people that are being known to have become billionaires out of that arms deal. But it's only President Zuma that is. It's only President Zuma that must play by the rule. And the others, it seems, they're being left scot-free. We haven't heard President Mbeki testifying in terms of what he knows, and we haven't heard other ministers, although they're still alive. It's only President Zuma that must fall with the sword. What's your take on that?
President Zuma is being made a scapegoat. He's very far from this. And the reason they're not dealing with any of those people that you've mentioned, those are the people that they should be dealing with if they were really interested in what they are saying. Now, this is another evidence to show that actually they're not even interested to find out who did what. This is just a mission to deal with President Zuma. That's all. Because when the matter was raised of the arms deal, it was raised, and President Mbeki was the guy that appointed a commission called the Muerane Commission to look into this thing. Now, if anything, if that Muerane Commission had come out, because that was a commission that was specifically looking into the arms deal, if that, I mean, Patricia de Lille was there in that commission to give her evidence, because she's been talking the most about this thing. So everybody had the opportunity to have their say in the Muerane Commission, which was a commission dealing with the arms deal. But President Zuma's name never featured in that thing. That was the actual commission dealing with the arms deal. So if there was any truth, if there was any integrity in the process, it should be informed by what would have come out of that commission. But that commission came and went and didn't say one word about President Zuma and all of that. So that's the clearest thing, just to show that President Zuma is just being lambasted with something that is very far from him, very, 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 very far from him. This is why I am convinced that he is being pursued not for corruption, no, because there's no corruption there. He is being pursued for the progressive ideas that he holds. Is being pursued because he does not, he's not your typical, he's not your typical Oxford type ANC member who must fall in line with the British colonialism and all of that. He's not in that school of thought. His school of thought is very different. He's a man of the people. He's not playing by any of these westernized rules. He plays by the rules that he understands democracy to be the rule by the people, for the people. He listens to the people. He doesn't listen to what IMF wants him to do or World Bank wants him to do. He listens to what the people want him to do. This is why people love him so much on the ground and all of that. So indeed, the man is being persecuted for his political posture.
Yeah, and you've also spoken about the Muerane Commission, which later on there was another commission. I think it was the Seriti Commission. So, what is the difference between the Muerane Commission and the Seriti Commission? Where do you draw the line? The difference of what were the findings of the Seriti Commission compared to the findings of the Muerane Commission? What is the difference between the Muerane Commission and the Seriti Commission?
Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember the difference between the two, but the Muerane Commission was the one that was specifically for the arms deal. I just forget what the Seriti Commission was dealing with, so I'll be lying if I...
The Seriti Commission was also dealing with the arms deal, whereby there were some other witnesses. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember vividly, I think President Mbeki did make an appearance on that commission, as well as this other gentleman, I think by the name of Fana Hlongwane. He did make an appearance on that, but we don't exactly know what was the outcome, because it never reached the public domain in terms of that. Yeah.
Those are the commissions that... if there was any semblance of truth about President Zuma being implicated, those are the commissions that were dealing with this thing. And there's not even a one sentence that talks about President Zuma in both those commissions. as it were. So indeed, that's more evidence to show ukuthi bamsukela uNxamalala.
Yeah. So is it true or false that the July unrest came as a result of the incarceration of the former president Msholozi by sending Msholozi to prison? So is it true or false? I mean, this is what people are saying. The July unrest came as a result of the incarceration, the imprisonment of the former president Nxamalala.
I think there's too much of a coincidence to try and say it's not true. But I think, okay, let's just make one thing clear, that when that was happening, President Zuma was already incarcerated. So whatever happened was not by his instruction. Before he left, he was very clear that for him, he is handing himself over for one reason and one reason only, because he wanted peace in the country. He's handing himself over so that there should be no loss of life or limb on his name. He's going there so that there could be peace and quiet. People in KZN were ready to deal with the police to try and stop them from taking President Zuma. But President Zuma just slipped away and drove himself to the escort correctional services to avoid the mayhem. So what happened afterwards, I think what really happened is what Professor Tepe characterizes as Russia's response, that people were just, that even if you are not educated, you can see when an injustice is being done. So from where all progressive analysts were sitting, people were responding to the unjust ruling by the Constitutional Court. You must remember what this Constitutional Court said. This Constitutional Court basically said we'll put the law on the side and deal with this man. The Constitutional Court, Kampepe, she says when she does the ruling, she says, firstly, just before we get there, in the first instance, this is the highest court in the land. Now, if you go to the highest court in the land, there must be, that court has got all kinds of things that the Constitution says it shall be a court of. One of them is a court of last resort. One of them is a court on a constitutional issue, and all of that. Now, for them to take this matter is in itself very suspicious. Why did they even accept this matter when their mandate is very clear on the matters that they deal with? You must remember that before this case, there was a case of somebody that was killed in Alex Khosa, that was killed in Alex by the soldiers, his COVID soldiers. They killed Khosa in Alex. And when that case was taken to the Constitutional Court, the person who had been murdered by the state, and the Constitutional Court chucked that away. It said, no, go to High Court. The DA went to Constitutional Court to argue about something to do with COVID, and at that time, COVID was busy killing people. And the court said, no, go to the High Court. And then comes Zondo with this lousy case of somebody that did not attend the meeting. And because of that, because of a case of someone that did not attend the meeting with Zondo became something that a highest court in the land saw fit to process. That alone should raise eyebrows to say, what is going on here? Then they go in, and then the case is made there that why are we dealing with this thing here? Why is it not done at all these other courts and all of that? And the position by Cesar Kampepe and her crowd, they say that this thing of going to the High Court, the Supreme Court, is going to waste a lot of time. We don't want to waste time there. And these are judicial processes that this constitutional democracy is based on. Here is the highest judge in the land saying, going through judicial processes which are stipulated in the Constitution, she says it's a waste of time because we even know how Zuma is going to respond to them. So there's no point, because when they deal with him, they're going to respond this way. She had a very clear view how President Zuma was going to respond, and she decided that based on what she thinks, President Zuma is going to respond is therefore not worth going through the process, and therefore they must entertain the case. And by entertaining the case, it meant that President Zuma is denied the right of appeal, because you can't appeal when it's done by that court. It meant also that it was denied the right to mitigate a sentence because he was not even given a hearing. So it didn't even have the right. It was not even subjected to a hearing in a trial court. So indeed, it was the biggest travesty of justice. So people saw that, and people said, no, this is not what our forebears died for. And this is why most analysts would say that that was a righteous anger. People were just revolting against the unjust decision of the Constitutional Court. So if truth be told, a structure that must answer for July 2021 is the Constitutional Court. It is the Constitutional Court that caused that mess because of their unjust decision that is not based on any law, based purely on emotions, because they were saying President Zuma has disrespected us. So basically, even the panel that was sitting there was an aggrieved panel. It's a panel that was sitting there, and they were saying, you know, he will know who we are, and all of that. We're going to deal with him. We're going to show him. That was the kind of attitude that Caesar Campepe was displaying there. And indeed, they showed them who they are. They threw him to jail for 15 months. So indeed, in answer to your question, the righteous response as articulated by the
Running out of time. Window. And off.
Characterization.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Now let's look at the current case that is pending at the High Court. The current case of the arms deal prosecutor Willie Downer, and of course the journalist, the Karen Mon. Is there a prima facie evidence in terms of how they have leaked the medical reports of President Zuma? And then also, what was the role of Yusuf Abramjee between the three of them? Yusuf Abramjee, he was also implicated that he was part of the people that leaked the medical reports. How did you find out in terms of who leaked the medical report, and what role did Yusuf Abramjee played in this regard?
Okay, let's clarify this. Firstly, there's no Yusuf Abramjee anyway. There's an Abramjee fellow, his brother, I think, that is implicated in some SMS that, but that was a different case. That was a case of a public protector. Yeah, so in that case, what had happened is that before the ruling was...
Zoom meeting 40 minutes, press ESC or double full screen mode, alert restore pages, title bar, button, Microsoft Edge closed unexpectedly, restore, button.
I would kindly request, let's just hold it there for a sec. Mr. Manyi will be right back with you. I think we experienced a bit of some technical glitches. We'll be right back in a jiffy. Stay with us. Yep.
Live on www.alexfm.co.za.
We're online.
24/7 around the world.
Risers and wipes.
Non-stop. This is
This is Patrice Motsepe. Paul Mashatile.
Kululi from Joy Celebration.
This is DJ Kanyani.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is Alex FM. Alex FM.
You are now tuned into Alex FM, where good music can elevate your mind. Yes, where you can find us at 89.1. You are now tuned into Alex FM. Roshan Bagay, good vibes all day and all night. Elevate your mind. So let us have a good time on 89.1. Elevate your mind. elevate your mind, make you feel alive. Elevate your mind. You are now tuned into Alex FM, where good music elevate your mind. Guess where you can find us at 89.1. You are now tuned into Alex FM.
Alex FM 89.1. Elevate your mind.
Broadcasting worldwide on www.alexfm.co.za.
All over the place.
Stream us live on www.alexfm.co.za.
We're online.
24/7 around the world.
Risers and wipes.
Non-stop. This is
This is Patrice Motsepe. Paul Mashatile.
Kululi from Joy Celebration.
This is DJ Kanyani. This is Alex FM. Alex FM.
Hi, this is Silo Makakangube, and you are listening to the Sweet Sunday Show with Muntu Kabanjwa Rurneda.
You are muted. Ne?
Yeah, so you're unmuted now. We can go ahead, Mr. Manyi. Yeah. So you still remember the last part of the question?
You are muted. You are muted. I can't hear you. You are muted.
All right, just hold a sec. Yeah, I'm sure now we are crystal clear now. Can you hear me now, Mr. Manyi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were still
But
elaborating.
your camera is cutting the camera is cutting your face. I can only see your mouth.
Oh, it's cutting my face. So can you see now? Are we clear now?
Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. Okay. Yeah. So you were still alluding about the case of Karen Mon and Willie Downer. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, that case is actually a very straightforward case because you know what's nice about it is that the dates there, the leakage happened on the 9th of August. And I need to actually just use this opportunity to dispel the myth by the media that we're trying to suppress media freedom. No, that's a pure lie. Whoever is saying that is lying. The truth is that the leakage happened on the 9th of August. And how do you know that this is a leakage? Because the case was on the 10th. Now, you see, you've got what is called NPA Act, Section 21, Subsection 6. That section of the Act says that nobody is supposed to give out information from the NPA without the permission of the National Director of Public Prosecution. That section says you can't give anything, any information, any document, anything. You're not supposed to give anything that you had discovered as part of the investigation and all of that. Now, what do we have? Now we have a situation here where, in fact, even Billy Downer himself has actually confessed to this thing that, no, we gave this thing, but under these kinds of conditions and all of that. And the conditions they gave was that to Karen, that don't publish it until it has landed in court. This is in their own affidavit, by the way. Now, I don't know what they're busy trying to deny here. You know, there are three things that you would look at to consider if something is a court document, like they're arguing. They are saying, no, these court documents were publicly available. That's a lie. For them to be a court document, number one, they should have been signed. You don't submit things to court that you don't sign. That's the first thing. That should have been signed. Were the documents signed or not signed? They were not signed. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, they should have been commissioned. In other words, a commissioner of oath put a stamp and signed. Was that done? The answer is no. Number three, there must be a registrar of court stamp there to say acknowledge receipt and all of that. Once you meet those three conditions, then those are court documents. These three things were not anywhere near the documents that Karen was given, which shows that these were not court documents because they didn't have all of these things. And also, this happened around COVID time. Now, there's another excuse that others are trying to say that, no, it was emailed, it was e-filed and all of that. But the truth of the matter is that Pietermaritzburg High Court, even as we speak, it's now April 2023. April 2023, Pietermaritzburg still does not have the e-filing system that maybe the Johannesburg courts or Pretoria courts they have. There, Semakhaya, they don't have that. So you couldn't say on the basis of having emailed and you want to say that was in a case file or something you've lodged. You have not lodged. You've just emailed. That's not in the system. There's an email system which, if you had done a similar thing to North Gauteng High Court, can be considered as having filed. But in this case, there's no such a system. So it's manual. So somebody must submit and somebody must stamp and all of that. So all of those things had not happened. And by the way, on the 9th already, there was a tweet that Karen sent out, which we have. And this is what submitted to court to say, you see, this thing was tweeted even before the court had admitted the documents, as it were. Then they admitted, then more tweeting happened, which we don't care about after the 10th, because now things are public. The issue that we're dealing with here is issue of the 9th of August, of court papers, of documents that do not have all the ticks for them to qualify as court papers. So if they're not court papers, they're NPA papers. If they're NPA papers, there must be permission. So we don't have permission from Patoy. We don't have all the signatures. We don't have the stamps. So therefore, that whole process is unlawful. So that's what we're dealing with here.
So what do you think will be the end game of this process?
Look, it depends it depends how the court is going to process this thing. Strictly speaking, the only discussion we should be having here is mitigation of sentence, because the issue here the issue of guilt, if the court is honest about the facts on the table, if the court is going to deal with the facts, not with the people, these people are just guilty. I can tell you this right now, purely based on even you sitting there. If I'm saying to you that what constitute court documents, and we agree that the three things must happen, Person must sign, must be commissioned, it must be a registrar stamp. Now, if you don't have that, why do you call that a court document? So it means it's NPA document. So if you've leaked NPA document, then the only thing that we need is to get Patoi to say, no, I actually agreed to this. But we don't have an affidavit from Patoi saying, I authorize this. Therefore, that makes that whole thing a leak. That makes that thing illegal, unlawful. And I mean, with other media houses, for instance, Alex FM included, you were not party to this, you were not given this information. Now, if this was freely available to media, why is it that in South Africa, there's only one individual that has this thing, her name is Karen Mon. Karen Mon can't constitute media in South Africa all by herself. You know, if this was given to everybody, then that discussion about it was given to media, we can be entertained. Just to show that this was a leak, it was given to one individual who just had to break the story, but broke the story and did everything that was unlawful to break the story. So this is what we're dealing with, a serious violation of the law.
So what is your take from the so-called the friends of the court that are attacking the former President Zuma, alluding that President Zuma is using some delaying tactics in this case? What is your response to that? And who is the so-called the friends of the court?
Yeah, look, these friends of the court are all these people like Bo, Helen Suzman Foundation, all the general normal right-wing groups. And all that. And SANEF is one of them as well. And these people are just creating they're just creating delays, because what is happening is that because this is a criminal case, the matter should be handled by a criminal court. Now, if they have any issue that they want to raise, the right thing to do would be to do this thing at a criminal court where the matter is being discussed. Now, it's funny that they say President Zuma is delaying. It's them that are delaying, because now instead of going to the actual case where this is happening, they start a civil proceeding on the side. Because what we were busy with last time at the Pietermaritzburg was not even the case itself, was them trying to get themselves out of the case. They are the ones that are wasting time here, because instead of trying to get themselves out of the case, they should just go to the case and plead their case there. And in fact, we are watching this judiciary with the hawk's eyes, because when President Zuma was doing was raising the issue of Billy Downer being his hands not being clean and all of that, the court ruled on this, and the court said, well, we hear you, Mr. Zuma, deal with that matter at the criminal court, and not only deal with it at the criminal court, deal with it at the end of the trial. This is what the court said. Then we said to the court, but court, how could you allow this process? And the court was not going to listen. And then we took the matter to the Supreme Court of Appeal. They agreed with the High Court. We took the matter to the Constitutional Court. The case was dismissed at the Constitutional Court. So we came back with an understanding now that if anybody has got a case of this nature, the courts, 3 courts have ruled that such matters are dealt with at the end of the case. We are surprised now that they were entertaining this matter at the beginning of the case, yet we've got the highest ruling, we've got a ruling from the highest court in the land that said such interlocutory matters must be dealt with at the end. So we're waiting with very big eyes to see if there's a Zuma law that was applied to say to him at the end of the trial. But now here we've got this case of Karen Mon and Billy Downer. Now that is them. All of a sudden, will the rules change? So we're watching to see whether this judiciary has eyes or it's a judiciary that is blind. So we sit and wait the outcome of the case. We don't know where it's going to be, but matters have been argued on this case.
All right. Now, I want us to talk about a story that is making headlines, the story that keeps tongues wagging, the letter that was written by former President Thabo Mbeki to the Deputy President of the ANC, Paul Mashatile. Although other people are saying the letter that was written by former President Thabo Mbeki, it contains some heavy, serious political education, which some people believe that there hasn't been much political education content since the end of 2022 policy conference. And they further allude that in a single letter, the former President Mbeki, he delivered a well-taught and pen dialectical materialism piece, and this letter has challenged the ANC to think deep about it. And other people are saying, guys, let's put some fictional politics issues aside. What is your understanding of the content of the letter? And what are the understanding of the pitiment points raised in this letter by former President Thabo Mbeki? Because he said, he further alluded that he had written the letter to Deputy President Paul Mashatile because President Cyril Ramaphosa has previously excused himself from discussing the
Alert, keep hand raised for 3 seconds.
He has excused himself from discussing the Phala matter in the ANC meetings. So now this is former President Mbeki saying the reason he wrote the letter is because President Cyril Ramaphosa has previously excused himself from the discussion of the Phala matter in the ANC meeting. So what is your understanding and what is your take and what is your understanding on the content of the letter? And what are some of the pitiment points that you pick up in this letter that was written by the former president?
Yeah. Firstly, let me say, sitting where I'm sitting, I think His Excellency President Mbeki, his blood is black, green, and gold, and he is guarding very jealously the integrity of the ANC. Yeah. So he is seeing the integrity of the ANC being washed down the drain. In that letter, he raises very critical issues because he is saying that in that letter he mentions two things, a couple of things. One, he says on the issue of Phala, the independent panel that had found that President Ramaphosa has got a case to answer. Now he says then him having what is a case to answer? A case to answer is all the things about the dollars that we put in the sofas, whether they were declared or not declared, and all of this thing, whether there's money laundering involved in this and all of that. So very weighty stuff, whether there was tax evasion or not, and all of that. Now the panel had said President Ramaphosa has got a case to answer. Now President Mbeki is saying, sitting where he's sitting, he would have thought that President Ramaphosa would never be involved in money laundering. He would never be involved in tax evasion. He would never be involved in a non-declaration. He would never be involved in keeping currency more than the prescribed period. You must remember that when you have this kind of currency, US currency or any other currency, not South African currency, the Reserve Bank Act, in fact, the Exchange Control Regulation, Section 7, Subsection 1 is very clear on this matter, that you can only keep that currency for 30 days. But Ramaphosa kept it for 45 days. So that's another violation, as it was. So which President Mbeki does not believe that President Ramaphosa would have made these violations. Then he says, in fact, I'm paraphrasing him, that from where he sits, President Ramaphosa would have breezed through this because he would have given all the right answers in the Committee of Parliament. Now he says his biggest problem here is that the ANC has basically issued a letter to instruct the ANC members in Parliament to block this inquiry. Now he says, now this has got his attention now. Why is it that the ANC is blocking this inquiry? Now, does it mean that the ANC is nervous, actually, that maybe, just maybe, President Ramaphosa has done all these violations, and therefore they are trying to make sure that it doesn't get exposed. What message are they sending by blocking this thing? He says that's the one thing. The second thing that they are blocking, he says the radar is on record saying there's lots of monies that are being siphoned off Eskom, R1 billion a month. And then Parliament is trying to say, okay, let's deal with that. Again, that Eskom probe, the ANC blocks again. Now, President Mbeki says, Kanti, what is going on here? Why do we have people that don't want to unearth the truth? What do they know? Could it be that, I mean, you must remember that one of the things that the Reuters also said is that Chancellor House, which is an investment company of the ANC, Chancellor House is implicated in this. They, in fact, got the tender. There's a company called Hitachi that was tendering for Eskom. That company of that Hitachi, Chancellor House is a stakeholder in that company. So therefore, when Hitachi wins, Chancellor House wins. When Chancellor House wins, the ANC gets the benefit. So therefore, it means that those things that Andre de Ruyter said have happened in Eskom, and the impeachment and the Eskom probe would have gotten to the bottom of that. ANC blocked that. Now President Mbeki says, what are you guys saying? Are you saying that therefore that what Andre was saying is actually true? What are you actually saying? So President Mbeki is here trying to defend the integrity of the ANC, which has been put into disrepute by President Ramaphosa and all his supporters in the ANC by not wanting to allow Mr. Ramaphosa to go through the process and be cleansed properly by the process. So that's really my take on the letter, that President Mbeki is desperate to position the ANC as a clean organization. But he says, basically he's saying, what the way ANC is behaving is making that very difficult. He says it's going to be difficult to defend if people say the ANC is corrupt. He says, he quotes President Ramaphosa himself. He says, but you said at some point that the ANC is not standing alone in the dock, but is standing as accused number one. Now, if you say the ANC is standing as accused number one, and then there is this opportunity here to prove that the ANC is not involved in corruption, but then we have the ANC people that don't want that to happen. Maybe you are right, Mr. President, to say ANC is accused number one in corruption. Maybe you are right, and I'm worried about this as me as President Mbeki. So that's my take, that President Mbeki is trying to fight for the soul of the ANC. That's what he's trying to do.
Other critics within the ANC, because it seems now this issue has divided the whole governing party. Now you have other critics hitting back to President Mbeki, the Ramaphosa camp. They're hitting back to President Mbeki. They are saying, well, President Mbeki is not the first time doing this. He has sidelined President Ramaphosa before, and President Mbeki is doing this out of the hatred. He hates President Ramaphosa. And then they've got quite very pertinent question in terms of the question that they ask is that how Mbeki managed to maneuver and sideline Ramaphosa back then when Ramaphosa was appointed the Secretary General of the ANC. And then they go on and ask serious questions in terms of why is former President Thabo Mbeki so incensed when the Section 89 independent panel had been exposed for its loopholes. And then other questions, they further go on and say, why is he not waiting like everyone else, for a consolidated report from the public protector and other state agencies to complete the work or to complete the investigations. And then the question goes on and says, why is he not satisfied with the parliamentary processes as they unfold? And then another question crops up again and says, what outcome does he want? Meaning President Big, what kind of an outcome does he want pertaining the Phala matter? And then also, what is he going to gain by trashing a sitting president? And then it goes on again, questions that are being asked by ANC members as well. They're saying, why is he strengthening the opposition hands in unseating the African National Congress at the 2024 elections? Some saying, isn't good enough to the newly appointed minister of electricity in working is a working hand in glove with everyone to resolve the electricity issues that have an impact on load shedding. So now all those questions have been raised that Mbeki he hates President Cyril Ramaphosa as far back as 1991 when Ramaphosa was appointed the Secretary General of the ANC. What is your take on all of that, Mr. Manyi?
No, I think all those people are just worried about the ANC losing elections. They are not worried about the quality of the ANC. All they want is just that the ANC must just be in power. President Mbeki is beyond that. President Mbeki is about ethics, as it were. There are a lot of factual inaccuracies in all those questions. The first issue, for instance, there's no authority. I repeat, there is no authority that is pronounced on the Section 89 panel report. There is no authority. It was just comrades blowing hot air in Parliament. They are not considered authority. The Constitutional Court, when President Ramaphosa took the matter to the Constitutional Court to want to set that report aside, the Constitutional Court just threw him back and said, no, this is not even our matter, and all of that. They chucked him out. They didn't even give him an hour in a day to explain himself. And that should have sent a very clear message that the Constitutional Court is very clear that what that panel has done does not require them to do anything. Because, in fact, that panel had issued, and this is why it's actually very strange. Even if President Ramaphosa was to take this thing to High Court, for instance, which he can do, if he takes it there, the High Court will simply say to him, but this report is not binding to you. This report there's no consequence out of this report. The only thing that this report is saying is that you've got a case to answer. This report is giving you an opportunity to go and table your version. This is what this report is doing. This report will give you an opportunity to bring in witnesses and all of that. That's what the High Court will say to you. So to have people now saying that there's been loopholes, there's no loophole that has been exposed on this report. This report has worked according to its mandate. Some people have not understood the mandate of a Section 89 panel. They critiquing the Section 89 panel using a standard of an impeachment committee. One of those people that were wrong in this thing would include even Thulima Madonsela herself. It would include Advocate Manya, all of these so-called experts. They got it all wrong, including Matthew Phosa, by the way, Comrade Matthew Phosa, who was saying something to the effect that there should have been oral evidence and all of that. But the rules that this panel was working on did not allow any of that. So the panel did everything within the rules that they were given. So you can't therefore fault them outside the rules and all of that, and then say things that they should have happened. But when you look at those things, those are the things that happened in the actual impeachment process. So the criticism was a misguided criticism, was a criticism not informed by facts, as it were. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that panel. As I said, there's no authority that has set that report aside. That report still stands. But I must still deal with these other issues.
Hi, this is Seloma.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Mai. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, then then you've got this public protector report that has come out in the media and all of that. But that thing, although it's not proper to deal with it here because it's still a confidential report, but if one talks to, if the media reports are accurate about what has happened there, a very simple thing, a very, very, very simple thing of paid work, for instance, you know, that's the simplest of the things. The ATM had said that no, but President Ramaphosa was involved in paid work. Right, let's just deal with just that as to what does paid work mean? Paid work means to be getting income either from salary or business or something. Now, if you have President Ramaphosa in the Polokwane ANC conference himself saying, me, I'm a farmer, I'm involved in the business of buying and selling cattle, and in fact, some of the customers are even here, you can even identify them. Now, why is it difficult to say that President Ramaphosa is involved in business, is earning income other than his salary? And then he then says, no, but this is Ntabanyoni, the CC. Now you go to the CC, you find that he is a sole member of the CC. Now, if the CC is the one that is making money, it's not him, it's the CC that is making money. But he's the sole member of the CC. How do you draw the line between the sole member of the CC, which is the Ramaphosa, and the CC? You know, a CC is not like a PTY Ltd. In a PTY Ltd, there's a separation of directors and management. But in a CC, and a member is the same as the owner of the company. So the two are not separable. So you can't run away from that. Now, when you look at for instance, the Corruption Act, the Corruption Act is very clear on this matter. The duty to report to the Hawks if there's theft or anything is not placed on manager, is not placed on CEO, is not placed on some employee, or it's placed on the member of the CC. And in this case, there's only one member. So even on the score of duty to report, the man did not report. We don't have a case number even as we speak. So he did not report, and you can't delegate that.
Running out of time. Window.
If you've delegated that, then you must have a case number. In the absence of a case number, the accountability is with the member. That's what PRECA says, that Corruption Act, Section 34, subsection 4E. That's what it says.
Yeah. Another question here posed to you, Mr. Manye. I think this one it comes from one of high-profile members of the ANC, whom I'm not going to be at liberty to mention his name, but
Zoom
I think
meeting 40 minutes.
Someone that maybe you might know, but I'm not at liberty to mention. I think he's in the executive committee of the ANC. He's saying, I would like to pose a question to Mzwanele Manye. Is that it seems Mzwanele forgets that President Ramaphosa is also protected by this Constitution Act of 108 of 1996. He says President Ramaphosa is also protected by the Constitution Act of 108 of 1996. And another high-profile comrade goes on to say, I would like to remind Comrade Mzwanele that former President Thabo Mbeki that is talking about. Comrade Mzwanele forgets that President Thabo Mbeki didn't utter out a single word. He didn't utter out a single word during the time of the former President Jacob Zuma and the Gupta brothers. President Mbeki was running amok. His silence was deafening. He was so quiet like a mouse that fell in the bucket of water. That was during the term of President Zuma. Now the comrade alludes the fact that President Mbeki never uttered a word during the term of President Zuma. He never uttered a word about the Guptas. It's only now that it's coming out because he's a power monger. He wants to ascend to the highest power. He wants to ascend to the highest office in the land. What President Mbeki is trying to do, he's trying to imitate of what this former ANC leader did by relinquishing the presidency of the organization and later making a serious comeback. So Mbeki, some saying that President Mbeki has an agenda. He wants to ascend to power. And now what he's doing, attacking the sitting president, he never did it when Zuma and the Guptas were doing all these shenanigans. What is your take on that? And also that President Mbeki, President Ramaphosa is protected by the Constitution Act of 108 of 1996. What's your take on that, Mr. Manyi?
There must be no confusion here. Constitution 108, it's the same. There's only one constitution here. To be going and going to giving all these details is just to create confusion. It's just the one constitution, the 1996 constitution, full stop. That's the constitution that you're dealing with. Act number 108, that's what it is. But that constitution, it protects everyone, as it were, not just President Ramaphosa, everyone. But it puts duty and obligation on him to behave in a particular way. This is what this constitution does. It's not a blanket protection. It protects everyone, but it puts duty. If the Constitution Section 96 says you shall not be engaged in paid work, he violates it, he gets engaged in paid work. The Constitution says you shall not do anything that would risk, that will expose you to a risk of conflict. He does that. I mean, how does it do this? If you have a president on the one side that has got executive authority to run the country on the one side, on the other side, you've got a president who's got a serious financial interest on 3 farms that are called Phala Phala. That Phala Phala puts together 3 farms, a serious financial interest that you have there. And then he runs a business there. Now, if you have one man that has got 2 responsibilities, that is a conflict by it's a classic definition of exposing yourself to a risk of conflict. Because let's say, for instance, a minister of environmental or something, he says, hey, you know, I don't want Angolans to come into South Africa because they'll bring diseases in the country. Will President Ramaphosa sign a bill? Will sign a bill into law that stop those? We don't know. That's one thing that can expose him into a risk of conflict. What happens if the people around those farms decide to say, actually, we have a land claim in those farms. We want a commission of inquiry to investigate our land claims. Will he sign off that bill, that commission to investigate Phala Phala for the land claim of those people? We don't know. So the fact that there are those things, that's what constitutes the risk of conflict. Now, the law says, don't put yourself in a situation where you expose yourself to that risk. The conflict does not even have to happen. It's just the risk. The threshold is very low. Just the risk is enough to transgress the law. The man has transgressed the law because he has put himself in a situation that exposes him to that risk. So on those 2 counts, he's already there, and we've already discussed the issue of duty to report. He didn't do, you know. So we have a situation. And lastly, you also have a president that has also abused his office, because Phala Phala at the time of the incident was not declared a national key point. So it was not declared a responsibility of the state. And by his own, by the way, he was advised to do this, and he did not want to accept that advice. In fact, that's another charge that should be laid, actually, to say he deliberately flouted the law. He was advised to say this must be national key point, and he refused that to be national key point. And now we have the situation now where the mess has happened there and all of that. Now, because it's not a national key point, it means it's personal property. Now, if it's personal property that is guarded by you personally, the state is not involved. Now, when there's a break in that property, why do you send your bodyguard to go and investigate that thing? Why don't you just go to the police to have the police investigate it or whoever else? But why do you send the apparatus that were given to you for your own